Some bruises never show on the skin until someone powerful enough finally sees them. Lena Hart thought she'd perfected the art of invisibility, hiding behind flawless work and careful smiles on the 23rd floor of Manhattan's most ruthless corporate empire. But when her controlling boyfriend's violence leaves marks even concealer can't hide, her boss, billionaire executive Victor Romano, notices what no one else dared to see. Within 24 hours, her abuser vanishes without a trace. No police, no questions, just gone. Now Lena faces a terrifying truth. The man who saved her is far more dangerous than the one who hurt her. If you're ready to discover whether protection can become love, or if it's just another prison with better walls, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far Lena's story travels across the world. The morning began like every other morning in Lena Hart's carefully constructed life, with lies. She stood before her bathroom mirror in the pre-dawn darkness of her cramped Queens apartment, studying the purple shadow blooming beneath her left eye. The bruise was 3 days old now, fading from deep violet to sickly yellow-green at the edges. Concealer would handle it. Concealer handled everything. Lena reached for the small tube with practiced efficiency, her movements automatic from months of repetition. Foundation first, building coverage in thin layers. Then concealer, patted gently with her ring finger to avoid aggravating the tender skin. Setting powder to lock everything in place. She worked quickly, methodically, transforming evidence into absence with each careful stroke. By the time she finished, the woman in the mirror looked perfectly composed, professional, untouchable, exactly as she needed to be. The apartment behind her reflection told a different story. A chair lay on its side near the kitchen table, one leg splintered from where it had hit the wall 2 nights ago. She'd meant to throw it out, but exhaustion had claimed her before she could manage even that small act of erasure. The broken chair remained, a silent witness to the violence she couldn't quite outrun. Lena turned away from the mirror and dressed for work with the same mechanical precision. Gray pencil skirt, white blouse buttoned to the collar, black blazer that hung loose enough to hide the finger-shaped bruises on her upper arms. Sensible heels that made no sound on the scarred hardwood floors. Her work uniform doubled as armor, each piece selected to deflect attention, to fade into the background of other people's important days. She was good at being invisible. She'd had plenty of practice. The subway ride into Manhattan passed in its usual blur of bodies and noise. Lena kept her eyes down, her expression neutral, her entire being compressed into the smallest possible space. She'd learned not to make eye contact, not to smile, not to give any opening that might be mistaken for invitation. The city demanded constant vigilance from women like her, women without power, without protection, without anyone who'd notice if they disappeared. She emerged from the subway into the steel and glass canyon of Midtown just after 7:30. The morning air carried the sharp bite of early autumn, and Lena pulled her blazer tighter as she joined the river of bodies flowing toward their various corporate destinations. Around her, the city hummed with ambition and ruthlessness, with the kind of casual cruelty that built empires on the backs of people nobody remembered. Romano Tower rose 68 stories above Fifth Avenue, a monument to wealth and influence that dominated the skyline for blocks in every direction. Lena had worked there for 18 months, ever since she'd landed the position as private secretary to Victor Romano himself, CEO, venture capitalist, and according to whispered speculation, a man whose business interests extended well beyond the legitimate. She didn't ask questions about the whispers. Questions were dangerous, and Lena had learned to survive by keeping her head down and her observations to herself. The lobby gleamed with polished marble and chrome, a cathedral to capitalism where the click of expensive heels echoed like prayers. Lena swiped her security badge and headed for the executive elevators, the ones that required special clearance to access the top floors. A young man in an expensive suit tried to catch her eye as they rode up together, his gaze lingering on her legs, her face, the careful blankness she wore like a mask. She stared at the ascending floor numbers and said nothing. He got off on 42. She continued alone to 68. The executive suite occupied the entire top floor, a sprawling domain of glass-walled offices and hushed efficiency where decisions worth millions happened behind closed doors. Lena's desk sat in the outer office adjacent to Victor Romano's private sanctuary, positioned like a gatekeeper between the man himself and everyone who wanted a piece of his time. She arrived before anyone else, as always. The early morning quiet allowed her to prepare for the day without interference, to arrange Mr. Romano's schedule in correspondence with the meticulous attention to detail he demanded. Perfection was expected. Perfection was the only thing that kept you valuable. Lena settled into her chair and woke her computer, pulling up the complex calendar that governed Victor Romano's existence. Back-to-back meetings scheduled every 15 minutes from 8 until 6, with a working lunch blocked off at 1. 3 international calls requiring translation services. A board meeting at 4:30 that would likely run long. She cross-referenced everything against the previous day's notes, checking for conflicts, anticipating problems before they materialized. This was her gift, the ability to see 10 steps ahead, to smooth the path before anyone knew obstacles existed. It made her indispensable. It made her safe. Or so she told herself. "You're here early." The voice made Lena flinch before she could stop herself. She looked up to find Victor Romano standing in the doorway of his office, studying her with the same intense focus he brought to everything. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The fabric cut so perfectly it seemed molded to his broad shoulders. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite, all sharp angles and uncompromising lines, with eyes so dark they appeared black in certain light. He was 42 years old and commanded every room he entered with the kind of absolute authority that came from never being denied. Lena had watched powerful men stumble over their words in his presence, reduced to nervous children seeking approval from an unforgiving father. She'd also watched him destroy careers with 3 words and a cold smile. "Good morning, Mr. Romano." Lena kept her voice level, professional. "Your first meeting isn't until 8. I wanted to review the Ashford contract before the legal team arrives." Something flickered across his expression, too fast to identify. He moved further into the reception area, his steps silent on the thick carpet. Victor Romano was a big man, tall and powerfully built, with the kind of presence that seemed to compress the air around him. Lena had never been afraid of him exactly, but she'd learned to maintain careful distance, the way you might with a caged predator whose mood remained forever unpredictable. "The Ashford deal is dead," he said, his voice carrying the faint trace of an accent she'd never been able to place. Italian, maybe, or something Eastern European buried beneath years of American polish. "They tried to renegotiate terms at the last minute. I don't do business with people who waste my time." Lena's fingers flew across her keyboard, already adjusting the schedule. "I'll notify legal and have them shift focus to the Chen acquisition. Should I prepare talking points for your 8 o'clock, or will you want the full presentation?" "Talking points," He paused, and Lena felt the weight of his attention settling on her like a physical thing. "You look tired." The observation landed like an accusation. Lena's hand moved instinctively toward her face before she caught herself, dropping it back to the keyboard with forced casualness. "I'm fine, Mr. Romano. Just a late night reviewing the quarterly reports." Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Lena kept her eyes on the computer screen, willing him to move on, to disappear into his office and leave her to the familiar safety of her work. But Victor Romano didn't move. He stood there, watching her with the patience of a man who'd built an empire on knowing when people were lying. "Make sure you're taking care of yourself," he said finally, the words carrying an edge she couldn't quite interpret. "I need you sharp." Then he was gone, the door to his office closing with a soft click that somehow felt more ominous than a slam. Lena released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her hands trembled slightly as she returned to the schedule, to the safe predictability of appointments and deadlines. She told herself the tremor was from too much coffee, not from the way Victor Romano's gaze had lingered on her face, on the bruise she'd thought she'd hidden so carefully. He couldn't know. No one knew. She'd made sure of that. The morning unfolded in its usual rhythm of controlled chaos. Executives came and went, each thinking themselves important enough to interrupt, to demand immediate access to the man behind the closed door. Lena deflected them all with polite efficiency, protecting Victor's time with the fierce dedication of a palace guard. Phone calls were screened, emails triaged, crises managed before they could escalate. She was good at this job. Maybe the only thing she was good at. At noon, Marcus arrived. Lena saw him step off the elevator and felt her stomach drop, her carefully maintained composure threatening to crack. Marcus Holloway moved through the executive suite like he owned it, his expensive suit and practiced charm opening doors that should have remained closed. He worked in corporate acquisitions 3 floors down, but he'd made a habit of finding excuses to visit the 68th floor, finding excuses to visit her. "There's my girl," he said, his smile bright and empty as a shark's. "Thought I'd see if you wanted to grab lunch." Every eye in the reception area turned toward them. Lena felt the weight of those stares, the curiosity and judgment of people who saw only the surface. Attractive man, pleasant invitation. What could possibly be wrong? They didn't see the warning in his eyes. They didn't hear the edge beneath the casual words. "I'm working through lunch today," Lena said, keeping her voice steady. "Mr. Romano has a tight schedule." Marcus leaned against her desk, invading her space with the casual entitlement of someone who believed her boundaries existed only as suggestions. "Come on, babe, you have to eat. Just 30 minutes. I said no. The words came out sharper than she intended. Around them, the ambient noise of the office seemed to dim, conversations pausing as people tracked the tension crackling between them. Marcus's smile never wavered, but something cold slid behind his eyes. Something that promised consequences for the embarrassment she'd just caused him. "We'll talk about this later," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur only she could hear. "At home." Then he straightened, his public smile back in place, and strode toward the elevators like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just threatened her in front of a dozen witnesses who saw nothing wrong. Lena's hands shook as she returned to her work. She pressed them flat against the desk, willing the tremor to stop, willing herself back into the careful blankness that kept her safe. But her mind raced ahead to tonight, to the inevitable confrontation, to Marcus's fury at being rejected in public. She'd pay for that. She always paid. "Miss Hart." Victor Romano's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. She looked up to find him standing in his doorway, his expression unreadable. How long had he been there? How much had he seen? "Yes, Mr. Romano? My 1 o'clock canceled. I'm going to need the Chen acquisition files pulled immediately, and I want you to sit in on the call with their legal team at 2. Take notes on their concerns regarding the intellectual property clauses." It wasn't a request. Victor Romano didn't make requests. He issued orders and expected immediate compliance. But something in his tone suggested this was more than just another task, more than another demand on her time. "Of course," Lena said, already pulling up the relevant files. "I'll have everything ready in 15 minutes. He nodded once, his gaze holding hers for a beat too long before he disappeared back into his office. The door remained open this time, an implicit instruction that she should join him when ready. Lena gathered the files with shaking hands, her mind still half caught on Marcus and the punishment waiting for her at home. But she forced herself to focus, to lose herself in work the way she always did. Work was safe. Work was controllable. Work asked nothing of her except competence, and competence she could deliver. By the time she entered Victor's office with the Chen files, she'd rebuilt her armor, piece by careful piece. The space was exactly what you'd expect from a man like Victor Romano. Sleek, expensive, intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, the city spread out below like a kingdom awaiting orders. The desk was a massive piece of polished mahogany that looked like it weighed more than a small car. Everything was precisely arranged, ruthlessly organized, reflecting the mind of someone who controlled chaos through sheer force of will. Victor sat in his leather chair, reading something on his tablet. He didn't look up as Lena entered, didn't acknowledge her presence until she'd placed the files on the corner of his desk with careful precision. "The intellectual property concerns center around 3 specific patents," she began, falling into the familiar rhythm of briefing. "Chen Industries holds—" Who was that man? The question stopped her cold. Lena looked up to find Victor watching her with that unsettling intensity, the tablet forgotten on his desk. "I'm sorry?" "The man who came to see you, the one who wanted to take you to lunch." Victor's voice remained perfectly neutral, but something dangerous moved beneath the surface. "Who is he?" Professional boundaries suggested she deflect, maintain privacy, redirect the conversation back to work. But Lena found herself answering before she could think better of it. "Marcus Holloway. He works in acquisitions." "And he's your—" The pause stretched, loaded with implication. Lena's throat tightened. She could lie, should lie, pretend Marcus was just a colleague being friendly. But Victor Romano had built an empire on reading people, on knowing when they were hiding something. "My boyfriend," she said quietly. Victor leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanging. But something shifted in the air between them, something that made Lena's pulse quicken with instinctive alarm. He studied her the way he might study a contract, looking for the clauses that revealed the real terms, the hidden costs buried in careful language. "He seemed upset when you declined his invitation," Victor observed, the words deceptively casual. "He'll be fine." "Will he?" The question landed with precision, cutting through Lena's careful deflections to the truth she'd spent months hiding. She wanted to look away, to escape the weight of Victor Romano's attention, but his gaze held her pinned like a butterfly in a collector's case. "The Chen files," she said, desperately trying to redirect. "Their legal team has concerns about—" "Take off your blazer." Lena's breath caught. "Excuse me?" "Your blazer." Victor's voice remained perfectly level, perfectly calm. "It's warm in here. You must be uncomfortable." It wasn't warm. The office was climate-controlled to exactly 68 degrees, the temperature Victor preferred. They both knew it, and they both knew this had nothing to do with comfort. "I'm fine, Mr. Romano. I'd prefer you were comfortable during our meeting." The words carried the unmistakable weight of a command. "Please remove your blazer." Panic clawed at Lena's chest. The blazer hid the finger-shaped bruises on her upper arms, the marks Marcus had left 2 nights ago when she'd burned his dinner. If she removed it, Victor would see. He would know. And knowing changed everything. "Mr. Romano, I really don't think—" "Now, Miss Hart." The authority in his voice left no room for argument. Lena's hands moved to the blazer's buttons with mechanical precision, her mind racing through excuses, explanations, anything that might deflect what was about to happen. But her fingers felt numb as she slipped the blazer off and draped it over the back of the chair she'd claimed. The sleeveless white blouse beneath offered no protection, no camouflage. The bruises stood out in stark relief against her pale skin, 4 on each arm, positioned exactly where someone's fingers would press when they grabbed too hard, held too tight, refused to let go. Victor's expression didn't change. He simply looked at the bruises, then at Lena's face, then back to the bruises. The silence stretched between them like broken glass, sharp enough to draw blood. "How long?" he asked finally, his voice so quiet she almost didn't hear it. Lena's throat closed. She couldn't answer, couldn't find words for something she'd spent so long pretending didn't exist. Her hands moved instinctively to cover the bruises, but Victor caught her wrist with surprising gentleness, holding her in place. "How long has he been hurting you?" The question cracked something inside her, some carefully maintained wall that had kept the truth contained. Lena felt tears burn behind her eyes, felt the weight of 18 months of fear and silence pressing down on her chest until she couldn't breathe. "It's not—" she started, then stopped. There were no words that would make this better, no explanation that would transform violence into something acceptable. "It's complicated." "No." Victor released her wrist but didn't move away. "It's actually very simple. He hurts you. That's not complicated. That's criminal." "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the granite facade. "Tell me what I'm missing, Lena. Because from where I'm sitting, I see a woman who comes to work with bruises she tries to hide. A woman who flinches when men raise their voices. A woman who's slowly disappearing behind fear, and no one's bothered to ask why." The tears spilled over before she could stop them. Lena pressed her palms against her eyes, mortified by the loss of control, by the vulnerability she'd exposed in front of the one person who could destroy her career with a word. "Please don't fire me. I need this job. I'll be more careful. I promise. You won't see—" "Fire you?" Victor's voice sharpened. "Why the hell would I fire you?" "Because I'm a liability. Because this is messy and complicated and you don't need someone else's problems cluttering up your office. Stop." The command cut through her spiral. Victor moved around the desk, closing the distance between them until he stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Look at me." Lena forced herself to meet his gaze, expecting disgust or pity, the 2 reactions she feared most. But Victor's dark eyes held neither. Instead, she saw something cold and dangerous, something that reminded her why people whispered about him in nervous tones. "I'm going to ask you a direct question," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "And I need you to give me a direct answer. No deflection, no protection of him, just the truth. Can you do that?" Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. "Is Marcus Holloway the one who hurt you?" The truth sat heavy on her tongue, 18 months of accumulated fear and silence finally demanding release. She could lie, should lie, protect Marcus and herself from the consequences of exposure. But something in Victor's expression told her he already knew. He was simply giving her the chance to claim it, to name what had been done to her. "Yes," she whispered. Victor's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. He stepped back, putting professional distance between them once more, and Lena felt the absence of his presence like a physical loss. He moved to the windows, staring out at the city below, with the rigid posture of someone containing violence through sheer force of will. "How long?" he asked again. 6 months? The admission scraped her throat raw. It started small. He'd get frustrated with work, take it out on me. Just yelling at first, then... She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "And you didn't report it?" It wasn't a question, but Lena answered anyway. "To who?" "Marcus knows people in HR. He'd make sure I was the one who got fired, who got blacklisted. I can't..." Her voice broke. "I can't afford to lose this job. My mother's in a care facility in Jersey. The costs, I'm all she has. If I lose this position, I lose everything." Victor turned from the window, his expression unreadable. "Where do you live?" The change of subject jarred her. "Queens. Why?" "Does he live with you?" "Not officially, but he has a key. He comes and goes." Lena stopped, understanding dawning cold in her stomach. "Mr. Romano, what are you going to do?" "Make sure you're safe." He pulled his phone from his pocket, typing something quickly. "You're not going back to that apartment. Not tonight. Not ever." "I can't just leave." "Yes, you can." Victor's voice hardened with the same authority that bent board members to his will. "You will. I'm having someone pack your essential belongings today. You'll stay in one of my properties until we can arrange something permanent." Panic flared bright and sharp. "People will talk. If I'm living in a place you own, let them talk." He dismissed her concern with casual brutality. "I employ 12,000 people across 4 countries. I don't make decisions based on gossip." "And Marcus?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Victor's expression went cold, the kind of cold that made grown men nervous. "Marcus Holloway is no longer your concern." "What does that mean?" "It means you're under my protection now." He held her gaze, making sure she understood. "And I protect what's mine very seriously." The possessiveness in those words should have frightened her, should have sent warning bells clanging through her mind. But instead, Lena felt something loosen in her chest, some knot of fear that had been pulled so tight for so long, she'd forgotten what breathing freely felt like. "I don't understand," she said softly. "Why would you do this for me?" Victor studied her for a long moment, his expression revealing nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested layers she couldn't see. "Because 18 months ago, I hired the most competent secretary I've ever had. Someone who anticipates problems before they exist, who handles chaos with grace, who makes my life easier in 1,000 small ways I probably don't acknowledge enough." He paused. "And because for the last 6 months I've watched that person slowly disappear, watched the fear creep into her eyes, watched her shrink herself smaller and smaller, trying to become invisible. I won't tolerate that. Not in my office, not anywhere." Tears burned fresh tracks down Lena's cheeks. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let me help." Victor moved closer, his presence overwhelming in its intensity. "Say you'll trust me to keep you safe." Trust. The word felt foreign, dangerous. Lena had learned through brutal experience that trusting men led to pain, that protection was just control wearing a prettier mask. But as she stood in Victor Romano's office, watching the city sprawl beneath them like a conquered kingdom, she realized she'd already made her choice. She'd made it the moment she told him the truth. "Okay," she whispered. Victor nodded once. Satisfied, he pulled his phone out again, making a call while Lena stood frozen, trying to process the seismic shift her life had just taken. Send a team to Queens. I'm texting you the address. Full pack out of personal belongings, focus on essentials first. I want it done in the next 2 hours. He paused, listening. I don't care if you have to pull people from other assignments. This is priority 1. He ended the call and looked at Lena. Write down anything specific you need from the apartment. Medications, documents, items with sentimental value. My people will make sure nothing important gets left behind. Your people? Lena tested the phrase, trying to understand what it meant. Who exactly are your people, Mr. Romano? A ghost of a smile touched his lips, cold and knowing. People who are very good at making problems disappear. The word should have terrified her, should have sent her running from the office, from Victor Romano and whatever darkness he'd just invited into her life. But Lena was so tired of being afraid, so tired of living in the constant shadow of Marcus's violence. If Victor was offering her a way out, even if that way led somewhere complicated, she'd take it. She'd take anything that wasn't this. There's a photo album, she said quietly. Blue leather, on the bookshelf by the window. It has pictures of my mother from before she got sick. And my laptop. It's old, but it has files I need. Everything else is replaceable. Victor made a note on his phone. Done. Now, we're going to need to establish some ground rules for your safety. Ground rules? You don't go anywhere alone. You don't deviate from approved routes between work and your new residence. You check in with me or my head of security twice daily. His tone suggested these weren't suggestions. If Marcus attempts contact, you inform me immediately. No exceptions. The reality of what she'd agreed to settled over Lena like a weighted blanket, comforting and suffocating all at once. This feels like I'm trading one cage for another. There's a significant difference. Victor's voice gentled slightly. My protection has an expiration date. The moment you feel safe enough to establish independence, I'll help you do exactly that. But until then, I need to know you're secure. Can you accept that? Could she? Lena didn't know, but she found herself nodding anyway, choosing temporary safety over familiar danger. Yes. Good. He checked his watch. The Chen call has been rescheduled for tomorrow. You're done for the day. My driver will take you to the new apartment. Security will meet you there with your belongings. I can take the subway. No. The word carried absolute finality. From now on, you use my cars, my drivers, no exceptions. Lena wanted to argue, to push back against the control he was exerting over her movements, but exhaustion won. She nodded, collecting her blazer and the files she'd brought in. She made it halfway to the door before Victor spoke again. Lena. She turned back to find him watching her with that same intense focus, as if he could see through all her careful walls to the frightened woman beneath. You're safe now, he said quietly. I give you my word. The promise should have felt empty. Words from a powerful man who didn't understand what safety meant to someone who'd forgotten how to trust. But something in Victor Romano's voice, in the cold certainty of his gaze, made Lena believe him. She was safe now. Or at least she was safe from Marcus. What she might need protection from next, that remained to be seen. The apartment Victor's driver delivered Lena to wasn't just nice. It was impossible. 23rd floor of a luxury building in Tribeca, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, furniture that looked like it belonged in an art gallery. The kind of place Lena had only ever seen in magazines, occupied by people whose lives bore no resemblance to her own. She stood in the marble entryway, still clutching her purse, trying to reconcile this gleaming space with the cramped Queen's walk-up she'd left behind. The driver had deposited her with professional efficiency, handing over a key card and informing her that security would arrive within the hour with her belongings. Then he'd disappeared, leaving Lena alone in luxury that felt more alien than comforting. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The apartment is yours for as long as you need it. Full security system installed. Code is 4729. My head of security will brief you when he arrives. VR Lena stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. What did you say to someone who just upended your entire existence? Thank you felt inadequate. This is too much felt ungrateful. She settled for something simple. Received. Thank you, Mr. Romano. The three dots indicating he was typing appeared immediately, then vanished. Then appeared again. Finally, a response came through. Victor. When it's not business, you can call me Victor. The intimacy of that permission unsettled her more than the apartment, more than the security measures, more than any of it. Lena set her phone down and walked further into the space, her footsteps echoing on polished hardwood. The living room opened onto a chef's kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to operate. The bedroom featured a bed large enough to sleep 4 people comfortably. The bathroom had heated floors and a shower with enough jets to qualify as a car wash. This wasn't protection. This was a different universe entirely. She was standing at the window, watching boats cut white trails across the darkening water when her phone rang. Marcus. Lena's hand trembled as she stared at his name on the screen, muscle memory flooding her with the old familiar fear. Answer or face worse consequences later. Always answer. But Victor's words echoed in her mind. If Marcus attempts contact, you inform me immediately. She let the call go to voicemail, her heart hammering against her ribs. 30 seconds later, a text arrived. Where are you? I went by your apartment. Your stuff is gone. Call me now. Then another. Lena. I swear, if you don't answer me. Another. You can't just disappear. We need to talk about what happened at your office. You embarrassed me. The messages kept coming, each one escalating in anger, in barely contained violence. Lena's breath came short and fast, panic clawing at her chest. Even here, 23 floors above the city, in a locked apartment Marcus didn't know existed, his words found her. His rage found her. She forwarded the text to Victor with shaking hands. The response came back in under a minute. Block his number. Now. I'm handling this. Lena did as instructed, her fingers clumsy on the screen. The moment Marcus's contact disappeared from her phone, she felt something shift. Small, but undeniable. One less avenue for him to reach her. One less weapon in his arsenal. A knock at the door made her jump. She checked the security camera Victor had mentioned, a discreet screen by the entrance showing the hallway outside. A man in his 50s stood there, salt and pepper hair cut military short, wearing a suit that didn't quite hide the build of someone who'd spent years in physical combat. Behind him, 2 younger men held boxes marked with her address. Lena opened the door. Miss Hart. The older man's voice carried the gravel of someone who didn't waste words. I'm James Chen, head of security for Mr. Romano's personal interests. May we come in? She stepped aside, watching as the 2 younger men efficiently transported boxes into the apartment. They moved with the same quiet competence as James, placing everything in the living room with careful precision. Lena recognized her blue photo album on top of one box, her laptop bag draped over another. They'd packed her entire life in less than 2 hours. We prioritize documents, electronics, and personal items, James explained once his team had finished. Clothing and toiletries are in the bedroom closet. If we missed anything essential, let me know and I'll have it retrieved. This is everything, Lena said quietly, staring at the boxes that represented 18 months of her life condensed into portable containers. Thank you. James nodded. Mr. Romano asked me to brief you on security protocols. Do you have a few minutes? They sat at the kitchen island while James outlined the measures Victor had implemented. The building itself was fortress-level secure, with controlled access and cameras monitoring every entrance. The apartment had a dedicated security system with panic buttons in each room that connected directly to James's team. Lena's new phone, James handed her a sleek device in a box, came with tracking enabled and a direct line to both James and Victor. I know this seems excessive, James said, reading her expression. But Mr. Romano doesn't take chances with people under his protection. And before you ask, yes, there have been others. He has a history of helping employees in difficult situations. That surprised her. Others? I've worked for Mr. Romano for 12 years. In that time, I've helped relocate 4 people escaping domestic violence, 3 dealing with stalkers, and 1 whose ex-partner made credible threats. James's weathered face softened slightly. He doesn't advertise it, but Victor takes care of his people. It's one of the reasons loyalty runs deep in his organization. Lena processed this new information, trying to reconcile it with the cold, demanding executive she thought she knew. I had no idea. Most people don't. Mr. Romano prefers his reputation to emphasize strength over compassion, easier to negotiate when people think you're ruthless. James stood, pulling a business card from his pocket. My number is programmed into your new phone, but take this anyway. Any concerns, any contact from Marcus Holloway, anything that makes you uncomfortable, you call me immediately. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. Understood? Understood. James moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Mr. Romano asked me to tell you that you don't have to worry about Holloway anymore. He's been handled. The phrasing sent ice down Lena's spine. Handled how? That's between Mr. Romano and Holloway. But I can promise you that he won't be a problem going forward. James met her eyes, and Lena saw something hard in his expression, the look of a man who'd solved problems in ways that didn't involve police reports or legal proceedings. Get some rest, Miss Hart. You're safe here. Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone with her boxes and her racing thoughts. She tried unpacking, seeking comfort in the familiar ritual of organizing her belongings. But her hands kept shaking, her mind kept circling back to James's words. He's been handled. What did that mean? Had Victor threatened Marcus? Paid him off? Something worse? The not knowing felt like standing on the edge of a cliff in the dark, unable to see how far the drop went. Her new phone rang just after 9. Victor's name appeared on the screen, and Lena answered before she could overthink it. Did James brief you? No greeting, straight to business. Yes, he said Marcus has been handled. What does that mean? A pause. It means he's no longer in New York. Lena's breath caught. Where is he? Does it matter? Victor's voice carried an edge of something dangerous. He's gone, Lena. He won't contact you, won't come near you, won't exist in your life anymore. That's all you need to know. People don't just disappear. They do when they're given the right motivation. The words fell like stones. Marcus Holloway accepted a very generous severance package this afternoon in exchange for his immediate resignation and permanent relocation to the West Coast. He signed a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and agreed to zero contact with you under penalty of legal action. His belongings are being shipped to an apartment in Seattle that's already been secured for him. He left New York 2 hours ago on a flight I personally arranged. The clinical precision of it stole Lena's breath. You did all that in one afternoon? I told you I protect what's mine. Victor's voice softened fractionally. How are you settling in? The question felt surreal after the revelation he'd just delivered. The apartment is beautiful. It's too much, but it's beautiful. Nothing is too much where your safety is concerned. A sound in the background suggested he was moving, perhaps pacing. I know this is overwhelming. I know you probably have questions about my methods, about what this all means. But I need you to trust that everything I'm doing is to ensure you never have to be afraid again. Lena walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The city spread below her like a constellation of lights, beautiful and indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its buildings. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Accept help, trust someone, let myself believe I might actually be safe. The admission scraped her throat raw. For 6 months, every day was about survival. About making myself small enough that Marcus wouldn't notice me, wouldn't get angry, wouldn't... She couldn't finish. You don't have to make yourself small anymore. Victor's voice carried absolute certainty. In fact, I'd prefer you do the opposite. The woman I hired was confident, capable, brilliant. I want her back. Tears burned behind Lena's eyes. What if she's gone? What if 6 months of Marcus broke something that can't be fixed? Then we fix it anyway. No hesitation, no doubt. But I don't think she's gone, Lena. I think she's still there, just buried under fear. And now that the source of that fear has been removed, she has space to resurface. The conviction in his words made something crack in Lena's chest, some protective barrier she'd built around the parts of herself that still hoped, still believed in possibilities beyond mere survival. She'd been so focused on getting through each day that she'd forgotten to imagine what might come after. Victor? The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that terrified and thrilled her. Thank you. For seeing me when no one else did. For caring enough to do something about it. I always see you, Lena. The words carried weight she didn't fully understand. More than you know. They talked for another 30 minutes, the conversation drifting from security protocols to the mundane details of her new apartment. Victor explained how to work the complicated shower, warned her that the building's gym required a separate key card, told her the coffee shop on the corner made the best espresso in Tribeca. The ordinariness of it felt like a gift after the intensity of the day. When they finally said goodnight, Lena felt something unfamiliar settling in her chest. It took her a moment to identify it. Hope. She slept that night in the enormous bed, wrapped in sheets that cost more than her monthly rent, and for the first time in 6 months, she didn't wake up listening for footsteps, didn't jolt awake at every sound, heart racing with adrenaline and fear. She slept deeply, dreamlessly, her body finally releasing the constant vigilance that had kept her tethered to survival mode. Morning came with sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Lena woke slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar space, by the absence of dread that had colored every morning for half a year. She reached for her phone, the new one James had given her, and found a text from Victor sent at 6:30. Driver will collect you at 7:45. Security detail will follow at a distance. You won't see them, but they'll be there. Coffee order has been placed at your usual shop. It'll be waiting when you arrive at the office. -V. The thoughtfulness of it caught her off guard. Victor Romano commanded boardrooms and brokered deals worth millions, yet he'd taken time to ensure she had her morning coffee. Lena stared at the message, trying to reconcile this version of him with the demanding executive who'd made grown men stammer. She dressed with more care than usual, selecting a burgundy sheath dress she'd always loved, but Marcus had called too attention-seeking. Her reflection showed someone different than the woman who'd stood at a queen's bathroom mirror hiding bruises. Same face, but the fear had receded from her eyes, replaced by something that might eventually become strength. The driver arrived precisely at 7:45, a different man than yesterday, but equally professional. He handed her a coffee cup from her favorite shop, prepared exactly how she liked it, and Lena felt that unfamiliar hope bloom wider in her chest. The executive suite was already buzzing with activity when she arrived. Lena slipped into her familiar role with practiced ease, managing Victor's schedule, fielding calls, transforming chaos into order. But something felt different today. She felt different. Victor emerged from his office just after 9, immaculate in a navy suit that probably cost what she used to make in 3 months. His eyes found hers immediately, a silent question passing between them. Lena nodded once, a small confirmation that she was okay, that last night hadn't broken her. The tension left his shoulders, subtle but visible if you knew what to look for. "Good morning, Miss Hart." His voice carried the familiar professional distance, but Lena heard the undercurrent of warmth beneath it. "Good morning, Mr. Romano. Your 9:30 with the Meridian Group is confirmed. They're sending 3 representatives instead of 2. Apparently the CFO wanted to sit in personally." Smart of them. Victor accepted this coffee she handed him. Black, 2 sugars, the way he took it every morning. "Pull the updated financial projections and have them ready. I want to see where they're vulnerable before the meeting starts." "Already on your desk." Something flickered across his expression, approval mixed with something deeper. "What would I do without you?" The question felt rhetorical, but Lena answered anyway. "Probably hire someone less observant." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Then he disappeared into his office, leaving Lena to manage the controlled chaos of another day. The morning passed in its familiar rhythm, but Lena felt aware of small changes, the way people glanced at her with curious looks, whispers that died when she approached. News traveled fast in any office, and Marcus's sudden resignation hadn't gone unnoticed. People were drawing connections, making assumptions about why he'd left so abruptly and whether it had anything to do with his secretary girlfriend. Let them talk. For the first time in 6 months, Lena didn't care what people thought. Their gossip couldn't hurt her anymore. She was reviewing legal documents for Victor's afternoon meeting when her desk phone rang. The receptionist's nervous voice came through. "Miss Hart, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent." Lena's stomach tightened. "Who is it?" She wouldn't give her name, just said she's Marcus Holloway's sister. Ice flooded Lena's veins. She'd met Marcus's sister exactly once at a family dinner where the woman had spent 2 hours making passive-aggressive comments about Lena's clothes. her job, her background. The memory carried sharp edges. Tell her I'm unavailable. I tried. She's insisting, and she's causing a scene in the lobby. Security is asking how you want to handle it. Lena closed her eyes, feeling the tentacles of her old life reaching into the new one she'd barely begun to build. Give me 5 minutes. I'll come down. She knocked on Victor's door, waiting for his gruff acknowledgement before entering. He was on a call, but his eyes sharpened when he saw her expression. I need to call you back, he said into the phone, then hung up without waiting for a response. What's wrong? Marcus's sister is in the lobby demanding to see me. Victor's expression went cold, the warmth evaporating like morning frost under harsh sunlight. No. I can't just hide from her. She'll make a scene and it'll reflect badly on... I don't care about scenes. Victor stood, moving around his desk with predatory grace. You're not going down there. I'll handle this. Victor, you can't... Watch me. He was already moving toward the door, radiating the kind of controlled fury that made smart people step aside. Stay here. Lena wanted to argue, but something in his expression suggested this wasn't negotiable. She watched him disappear into the elevator, then returned to her desk on shaking legs. The minutes crawled by like hours, her imagination conjuring increasingly dire scenarios. 15 minutes later, Victor returned. Alone. She's gone, he said, his tone suggesting the matter was closed. And she won't be back. What did you say to her? Victor leaned against her desk, close enough that Lena could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that reminded her of cedar and smoke. I explained that you're under my personal protection, and any further contact from the Holloway family would be considered harassment. I also mentioned that I have lawyers who specialize in restraining orders and making people's lives extremely uncomfortable. You threatened her. I protected you. His eyes held hers, unflinching. There's a difference. She came here to intimidate you, to make you feel small and scared. I don't allow that. Not in my building. The possessiveness in his voice should have set off alarm bells, should have reminded Lena of Marcus's control, of the way men claimed ownership over women and called it protection. But Victor's protection felt different. It created space for her to breathe rather than suffocating her, expanded her world rather than contracting it. I need to learn how to fight my own battles, Lena said quietly. You will, but not today. Victor's expression softened fractionally. Today, you're still finding your footing. Tomorrow, next week, next month. When you're ready, I'll step back. But right now, while you're vulnerable, I'm not letting anyone hurt you, not even tangentially. The certainty in his words wrapped around Lena like armor. She nodded, accepting the protection even as part of her chafed against the dependence it created. The rest of the day passed without incident, but Lena felt hyper-aware of Victor's presence, the way he checked on her between meetings, the way his gaze lingered when he thought she wasn't looking, the way he'd positioned himself as a barrier between her and anything that might cause harm. She left the office at 6, Victor's driver waiting at the curb. The evening stretched before her, empty and strange. No Marcus to appease, no violence to anticipate, no fear to manage. Just silence and safety and the unfamiliar weight of freedom. Lena spent the evening unpacking her boxes, arranging her belongings in the pristine apartment. Her photo album found a home on the bookshelf by the window. Her worn paperbacks lined up beside leather-bound volumes she suspected came with the apartment. Her old coffee maker looked absurd next to the professional-grade espresso machine, but she set it up anyway, a small piece of herself in this borrowed space. Her phone buzzed just after 9. Victor again. How are you settling in? Lena smiled despite herself. Getting there. The apartment still doesn't feel real. Give it time. Eventually, it'll just feel like home. She thought about that, about the concept of home. Her Queens apartment had never felt like home. It had been a cage wearing different decoration. Her mother's house before the nursing facility had been home once, but that woman no longer existed in any meaningful way. Maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was a feeling, something you built rather than found. Thank you for handling Marcus's sister today. I should have been braver. The response came quickly. Bravery isn't throwing yourself at every threat. Sometimes it's accepting help from people who care about you. Lena stared at that word. Care. Victor Romano cared about her. When had that happened? When had she become more than just an efficient secretary, more than just another employee in his empire? Why are you doing all this for me? She typed, then hesitated before sending. The question felt too vulnerable, too revealing, but she hit send anyway, needing to understand. The three dots appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, a response. Because 18 months ago, I hired someone I needed. And somewhere along the way, she became someone I wanted to protect. Get some rest, Lena. We have a long day tomorrow. The answer raised more questions than it settled, but Lena didn't push. She said goodnight and set her phone aside, Victor's words echoing in her mind. Someone he wanted to protect. She fell asleep wondering what exactly that meant and whether she should be more afraid of the answer than she was. The next morning brought a new routine. Victor's driver, security she couldn't see but knew was there, coffee waiting at her desk. The familiarity of work grounded her, gave her something to focus on besides the seismic shifts in her personal life. 3 days passed in this new pattern. 3 days of safety, of breathing without fear, of rebuilding herself piece by careful piece. Marcus didn't call, didn't text, didn't exist in her life anymore. His sister didn't return. The whispers at work faded to background noise. Lena began to believe that maybe, possibly, she might actually be okay. Then Friday afternoon, everything changed again. She was organizing files for Victor's Monday meetings when James appeared in the executive suite, his expression grim. He went straight to Victor's office without checking with Lena first, a breach of protocol that sent warning bells clanging through her mind. They emerged 10 minutes later, Victor's face set in lines of cold fury. Lena. His voice carried an edge that made her pulse quicken. I need you to come with me. Now. What's wrong? Marcus is back in New York. The words hit Lena like a physical blow. Her vision narrowed, the familiar edges of panic creeping in from all sides. Marcus was back. After 3 days of breathing freely, of believing she might actually be safe, he'd returned to drag her back into the nightmare she'd barely escaped. How? The word came out strangled. You said he was in Seattle. You said he agreed. He broke the agreement. Victor's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. He landed at JFK 2 hours ago. James has eyes on him now. James stepped forward, his expression professionally neutral but his eyes sharp with concern. He went straight to your old apartment in Queens. When he found it empty, he started making calls. We intercepted communications with his sister. He knows you're still in the city, and he's looking for you. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Lena's feet. She gripped the edge of her desk, fighting to keep her breathing steady, to not let the terror win. What does he want? What men like him always want. Victor's voice carried a cold edge that made her shiver. Control. The satisfaction of proving you can't escape him. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in its intensity. But he's wrong. You're not going back to that life, Lena. I won't allow it. You can't just... Lena stopped, hearing the absurdity of her own protest. Victor had already done the impossible. He'd relocated Marcus across the country in an afternoon, made him disappear like smoke. If anyone could protect her from this, it was the man standing before her with murder in his eyes. Come with me. Victor's hand settled on her lower back, gentle but insistent. James has a car waiting downstairs. We're getting you somewhere Marcus can't reach. Where? Somewhere he'll never think to look. Victor guided her toward the elevator, James falling into step beside them. My estate in Greenwich. Full security, gated property, staff I trust with my life. You'll be safe there while I handle this situation permanently. The word permanently sent ice through Lena's veins. Victor, what are you going to do? He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, Lena saw past the corporate facade to something darker underneath. Something that reminded her why people whispered about Victor Romano in nervous tones, why his business rivals disappeared from negotiations without explanation, why loyalty in his organization ran deeper than mere employment. Whatever I have to, he said simply. The elevator descended in tense silence. Lena's mind raced, trying to process the speed at which her life kept fracturing and reforming. 3 days ago, she'd been terrified in a Queens apartment. Yesterday, she'd felt safe for the first time in months. Now she was fleeing the city entirely, running from a man who refused to let her go. "I should have known it was too easy," she said quietly. "Men like Marcus don't just give up." "No, they don't." Victor's voice hardened, "which is why I should have handled this differently from the start. I gave him an out because I thought financial motivation would be enough. I was wrong." James led them through the parking garage to a black SUV with windows tinted so dark they appeared opaque. Two men Lena didn't recognize flanked the vehicle, both wearing suits that didn't quite hide the weapons beneath. Security, she realized. Armed security. The reality of her situation crystallized with brutal clarity. This wasn't just about escaping an abusive boyfriend anymore. This had become something bigger, more dangerous, something that required armed guards and safe houses. "Get in," Victor said, opening the rear door. "James will ride with us. The security team will follow in a separate vehicle." Lena slid into the SUV, her hands trembling. Victor climbed in beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like a vault ceiling. They pulled out of the garage and into Friday afternoon traffic, the city streaming past the tinted windows. Lena watched Manhattan recede, feeling like she was leaving behind more than just buildings. She was leaving behind the fragile sense of normalcy she'd barely begun to construct. "Tell me about the estate," she said, needing to focus on something concrete, something that wasn't the fear clawing at her chest. Victor's expression softened slightly. 20 acres in Greenwich, Connecticut. The main house has 8 bedrooms, though most stay empty. There's staff quarters, a guest house, full security infrastructure. I bought it 5 years ago as a retreat from the city, somewhere I could work without interruption. "Do you go there often?" "Not as often as I should." He looked out the window at the traffic around them. "I'll be staying there with you until this situation is resolved. I'm not leaving you alone while Marcus is a threat." The protective instinct in his voice sent warmth through Lena's chest, complicated and confusing. "You don't have to do that. I'm sure your security team is more than capable. I'm not delegating your safety." Victor's tone left no room for argument. "Not this time. Marcus escalated the situation by breaking our agreement. That changes the parameters of how I handle him." James spoke from the front seat, his voice carefully neutral. "We've confirmed Marcus made contact with 3 of his former colleagues from acquisitions. He's trying to locate information about where Lena might be staying, asking about Mr. Romano's properties in the city. He won't find anything," Victor said with cold certainty. "The Tribeca apartment is owned through a shell corporation 6 layers deep. My name appears nowhere in the documentation." "What about your Greenwich estate?" Lena asked. "Can he find that?" "The property is registered to a trust, and the trust is buried under enough legal obfuscation to frustrate even determined investigation." Victor's hand found hers on the seat between them, his fingers curling around hers with surprising gentleness. "You're safe, Lena. I promise you that." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that Victor's wealth and power and ruthless efficiency could protect her from Marcus's obsessive need for control. But 6 months of abuse had taught her that safety was an illusion, that control always found a way to reassert itself. "He'll keep looking," she said quietly. "Marcus doesn't give up on things he considers his, and he's always considered me his." Then he's going to learn a very painful lesson about ownership. The menace in Victor's voice should have frightened her. Instead, Lena felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of trust in someone who'd proven he'd go to war for her safety. The drive to Greenwich took just over an hour. They left the city's steel and glass behind, trading it for tree-lined roads and estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. This was old money country, where wealth whispered instead of shouted, where power lived in sprawling properties that had housed the same families for generations. Victor's estate appeared at the end of a long private drive, the main house rising like something from a different era. Colonial architecture with modern additions, all gleaming white stone and tall windows that caught the late afternoon sun. Manicured lawns stretched in every direction, broken by stands of mature trees and gardens that probably required a team of professionals to maintain. It was beautiful. It was also completely isolated from anything resembling normal life. The SUV pulled up to the main entrance where a woman in her 60s waited on the steps. She wore practical slacks and a cardigan, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression warm but assessing as she watched them exit the vehicle. "Mrs. Chen," Victor said, and Lena realized this must be James's wife. "Thank you for opening the house on such short notice." "Of course, Mr. Romano." Mrs. Chen's eyes shifted to Lena, and something in her expression gentled. "You must be Miss Hart. Welcome. I've prepared the blue guest suite for you. It has lovely views of the gardens and gets beautiful morning light." "Thank you," Lena managed, overwhelmed by the gracious normality of the greeting after the tension of the drive. "Mrs. Chen manages the estate when I'm not in residence," Victor explained as they climbed the steps. "She and James live in the guest house. There are 2 additional security personnel on the grounds at all times, rotating in 8-hour shifts." The interior of the house matched its exterior elegance. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, furniture that managed to be both expensive and comfortable. Mrs. Chen led them through rooms that spoke of old wealth and careful taste, everything perfectly maintained but lived in enough to feel real. The blue guest suite occupied the entire east wing of the 2nd floor. Lena stepped into a space larger than her entire queen's apartment had been, decorated in soft blues and creams that did indeed capture beautiful light from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. "Your belongings from the Tribeca apartment will be delivered this evening," Mrs. Chen said. "In the meantime, I've stocked the closet with basics, robes, slippers, toiletries. Dinner will be served at 7 unless you prefer a different time." "7 is perfect," Victor answered when Lena couldn't find her voice. "Thank you, Margaret." Mrs. Chen excused herself, leaving Lena and Victor alone in the elegant suite. Silence stretched between them, weighted with everything that had happened in the past few hours. "I know this is overwhelming," Victor said finally. "I know you're probably terrified and confused and wondering what the hell you've gotten yourself into." Lena sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly unreliable. "I just want my life to be normal again." "Is that too much to ask?" "Your life was never normal, Lena." Victor moved to the window, staring out at the gardens with his hands clasped behind his back. "Normal was you hiding bruises and living in fear. Normal was surviving instead of living. I'm not offering you normal. I'm offering you safe. By taking me away from everything I know? By keeping me in a beautiful cage in Connecticut?" He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Is that what you think this is? A cage?" "I don't know what to think anymore." Lena pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration and fear. 3 days ago you saved me from Marcus. Today you're hiding me in a mansion guarded by armed security. Tomorrow... What? What happens tomorrow, Victor? Tomorrow I make sure Marcus Holloway never threatens you again." The cold certainty in his voice made Lena look up. "I gave him a chance to walk away. He chose to come back. That was his mistake." "What are you going to do to him?" Victor studied her for a long moment, and Lena saw him weighing his words, deciding how much truth she could handle. "What would you like me to do?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't understand. Marcus hurt you, terrorized you, made you afraid to exist in your own skin." Victor moved closer, sitting on the bed beside her with careful distance between them. "I can make him disappear permanently. No police, no questions, just gone. Or I can destroy him financially, legally, professionally, make him wish he'd never heard your name. Or I can simply ensure he's too terrified to ever come near you again." He paused. "The choice is yours, Lena. Tell me what you need." She stared at him, trying to process the offer he was making. Victor was giving her the power to decide Marcus's fate, to choose the nature of his punishment. 6 months ago, she would have said such choices were impossible, that vengeance solved nothing. But 6 months of abuse had changed her, had carved away the parts that believed in mercy for people who showed none. "I don't want to see him again," she said quietly. "I don't want to be afraid anymore. But I also don't want to become someone who destroys people, even people who hurt me." "That's not weakness." Victor's voice gentled. "That's strength. It takes strength to choose not to inflict the same pain that was inflicted on you." "Then what do we do?" "We make him understand that you're untouchable, that any attempt to contact you, to find you, to even think about you, will result in consequences he can't survive. Victor's hand found hers again, his grip warm and solid. And then we let you build a life where Marcus Holloway is nothing but a bad memory that gets smaller every day. Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over, and Victor surprised her by pulling her against his chest, his arms coming around her with careful gentleness. "You're safe now," he murmured against her hair. "I've got you." She let herself lean into his strength, let herself believe for just a moment that safety might actually be possible. Victor's heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, his presence solid and real in a world that felt like it kept shifting under her feet. They stayed like that for several minutes before Victor gently pulled back, his hand settling on her shoulders. "I need to make some calls, handle the Marcus situation. Mrs. Chen will bring you dinner if you'd prefer to eat here rather than downstairs. Get some rest, Lena. You've had a hell of a day." He stood and moved toward the door, but Lena's voice stopped him. "Victor?" He turned back, eyebrows raised in question. "Why do you care so much? I'm just your secretary? You could have fired me, washed your hands of this entire mess. Why are you going to war for me?" Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully maintained facade. "You stopped being just my secretary the moment I saw those bruises," he said quietly. "And I go to war for people I care about. That's who I am, Lena. For better or worse." Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone with the weight of that confession and the dangerous hope blooming in her chest. She explored the suite, marveling at the luxury that surrounded her. The bathroom had a soaking tub large enough to swim in and a shower with rainfall heads. The closet was indeed stocked with everything she might need: robes in her size, slippers, high-end toiletries. Someone had anticipated her needs with unsettling accuracy. Lena sank into the tub, letting hot water wash away the tension of the day. Her mind kept circling back to Victor's words, to the careful way he'd held her, to the murder in his eyes when he'd learned Marcus had returned. This went beyond employee protection, beyond simple kindness. Victor Romano had invested himself in her safety with the same ruthless focus he brought to business acquisitions. The question was why, and whether Lena was ready for the answer. She was drying her hair when her new phone buzzed. A text from James. "Subject spotted at a bar in Midtown, making calls and showing your photo to patrons. We have surveillance in place. Mr. Romano has been notified." Lena's hands shook as she typed a response. "Is he drunk?" "Appears to be intoxicated. Behavior is erratic. Recommend you stay in the suite for the evening. Security has been increased on the property." She set the phone down, her brief moment of peace shattered. Marcus was out there, drunk and desperate, and looking for her. The image sent ice through her veins. She knew what Marcus was like when he drank, knew how violence became his first language when alcohol stripped away his careful public persona. Another text, this one from Victor. "James told me. I'm handling it. You're safe where you are. Try to eat something and get some rest." Lena wanted to ask how he planned to handle a drunk, obsessed man making a scene in Manhattan bars. Wanted to know what methods Victor would employ, what lines he'd cross. But part of her didn't want those answers. Didn't want to know the details of what protecting her actually cost. Mrs. Chen arrived at 7 with a dinner tray, roasted chicken, vegetables that looked like they'd been picked from a garden that afternoon, fresh bread that filled the room with its scent. Lena forced herself to eat, knowing she needed the fuel even if her appetite had disappeared. "Mr. Romano asked me to check on you," Mrs. Chen said as she collected the tray an hour later. "He's tied up with business matters but wanted to ensure you have everything you need." "I'm fine. Thank you." The lie came automatically, but Mrs. Chen's knowing look suggested she saw through it. "I've worked for Mr. Romano for 10 years, the older woman said gently. "I've seen him help other people in difficult situations. He's a good man, Miss Hart. Better than his reputation suggests. You're safe in his care." "Everyone keeps telling me that. Because it's true." Mrs. Chen moved toward the door, then paused. "My daughter was in a situation similar to yours years ago. Her husband, well, he was a monster. James and I tried to help, but she kept going back to him. Took 3 trips to the emergency room before she finally left for good." Her voice thickened with old pain. "Mr. Romano helped her when no one else would. Gave her a job, a safe place to stay, the resources to start over. She's married now to a good man, has 2 beautiful children. Sometimes I look at her and think about what might have happened if Victor hadn't intervened. Lena felt her throat tighten. I didn't know. Most people don't. Mr. Romano doesn't advertise his kindness. Mrs. Chen smiled. Get some rest, dear. Tomorrow will be better than today. That's the thing about getting distance from trauma. Each day gets a little easier. After she left, Lena stood at the window watching darkness settle over the estate. Security lights illuminated the grounds, and she caught glimpses of the armed guards James had mentioned making their rounds. The protection felt both comforting and surreal. Her phone buzzed again. Victor, Marcus has been dealt with. He won't be a problem tonight. Lena's fingers hovered over the keyboard. What did you do? Had a conversation. Sometimes conversations are enough. Somehow she doubted it had been just a conversation, but she let it go. Thank you. Get some sleep. I'll see you in the morning. She climbed into the enormous bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. The house settled around her with creaks and whispers, unfamiliar sounds that should have made her nervous. But Lena felt safe here in a way she hadn't felt anywhere in months. Protected, guarded, valued. Dangerous feelings, all of them. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of Marcus's face twisted with rage, of Victor's cold eyes promising retribution, of her own voice asking questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. She woke several times to darkness and silence, her heart racing until memory reasserted itself and she remembered where she was. Safe. She was safe. Morning arrived with pale light filtering through the curtains. Lena woke to find a text from Victor sent at 6. Coffee is ready downstairs when you're ready. We need to talk. She dressed in jeans and a sweater from the selection Mrs. Chen had provided, then made her way through the quiet house. Voices led her to a sun-filled breakfast room where Victor sat with James, both men studying a laptop screen with intense focus. They looked up as she entered, and Lena saw something pass between them, a silent communication that spoke of decisions made, actions taken. Good morning, Victor said, his voice carefully neutral. Did you sleep? Some. Lena poured coffee from the carafe on the sideboard, grateful for something to do with her hands. Your text said we needed to talk. Sit down. It wasn't quite in order, but close enough. Lena settled into a chair across from Victor, cradling her coffee mug like a lifeline. James closed the laptop and stood. I'll give you 2 privacy, he said, excusing himself with professional efficiency. Once they were alone, Victor leaned back in his chair, studying Lena with that unsettling intensity she'd come to recognize. Marcus was arrested last night. The words hit like a slap. What? How? Drunk and disorderly, assault on a police officer, resisting arrest. Victor's expression remained carefully neutral. Turns out he got aggressive with the wrong person at that Midtown bar. An off-duty officer intervened, Marcus threw a punch, things escalated. He spent the night in jail. Lena processed this, looking for the lie underneath. You arranged it. I may have ensured certain people were in the right place at the right time. Victor's smile held no warmth. And I may have made sure the incident was documented thoroughly, with multiple witnesses. Marcus's behavior was all his own, Lena. I just created an environment where consequences found him. Is he still in jail? Released on bail 2 hours ago, but he's looking at serious charges and his legal problems are just beginning. Victor pushed a folder across the table. I've had my lawyers review the non-disclosure agreement he signed. He violated multiple clauses by returning to New York and attempting to locate you. That opens him up to financial penalties that will bankrupt him. Lena opened the folder, scanning legal documents dense with terminology she barely understood. You're suing him? I'm enforcing an agreement he willingly signed. Victor's voice hardened. Marcus thought money would be enough to buy his compliance. He was wrong. Now he's going to learn that breaking deals with me costs more than he can afford. How much? $5 million in penalties for each violation. He's already triggered 3 separate clauses. Victor let that sink in. Marcus Holloway doesn't have $15 million, Lena. His assets total maybe $300,000. This lawsuit will destroy him completely. She should have felt satisfaction or relief or something approaching justice. Instead, Lena just felt tired. Will that make him stop? combined with the criminal charges, the restraining order I filed on your behalf this morning, and the very thorough conversation I had with him through his lawyer. Yes, Victor's eyes held hers. Marcus Holloway is facing financial ruin, potential jail time, and a future where any contact with you results in immediate incarceration. He's done, Lena. You won. But it didn't feel like winning, it felt like surviving, which wasn't quite the same thing. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now you decide what you want your life to look like. Victor stood, moving to the windows overlooking the grounds. You can stay here as long as you need. You can return to the Tribeca apartment. You can relocate entirely if a fresh start appeals to you. I'll support whatever choice you make. And my job? Your position is waiting whenever you're ready to return. He glanced back at her. Though I hope you'll consider taking some time off first. You've been through trauma, Lena. You deserve space to process it. She joined him at the window, standing close enough to feel his presence, but not quite touching. I don't know how to have space. I don't know how to not work, not stay busy, not keep my mind occupied with anything except what I'm trying not to think about. Then learn. Victor's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers with easy familiarity. Stay here for a while, rest, heal, figure out who you are when you're not afraid. And you'll just what? Work from here? Put your entire life on hold for me? My life doesn't feel on hold when you're in it. The confession came quietly, almost reluctantly, like Victor was admitting something he'd tried to keep buried. If anything, it feels more purposeful than it has in years. Lena turned to face him, searching his expression for answers to questions she didn't know how to ask. Victor, what is this? What are we doing? I don't know. His free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I just know that keeping you safe has become the most important thing in my world, and I'm not ready to examine why that is. She should step back, establish boundaries, remind them both of the professional lines they were blurring. But Lena found herself leaning into his touch instead, craving the warmth and solidity of him after so many months of cold fear. I'm broken, she whispered. Marcus broke something in me, and I don't know if it can be fixed. You're not broken. You're healing. Victor's forehead came to rest against hers. And healing takes time, Lena. Let me give you that time. Standing there in the morning light with Victor's arms around her and safety settling like a blanket over her shoulders, Lena felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but the possibility of it. The beginning of believing that maybe, just maybe, she could build a life that didn't revolve around fear. Okay, she breathed. I'll stay. Victor's relief was palpable in the way his shoulders relaxed, in the breath he released against her temple. He held her for another moment before stepping back, his hand sliding from her face with obvious reluctance. I need to handle some business calls this morning, he said, his voice returning to its familiar controlled tone. But I'll be working from the study if you need anything. Mrs. Chen can show you around the property, or you can explore on your own. The grounds are secure. Lena nodded, already feeling the absence of his touch like a physical loss. I think I'll explore. I need to move, clear my head. Take your phone. James has the security team on alert, but I want to be able to reach you. Victor's eyes held hers with intensity that made her pulse quicken. And Lena? You're not a prisoner here. This isn't a cage. It's a sanctuary until you're ready to leave it. The distinction mattered, she realized. Marcus had locked her in with violence and control. Victor was offering her space with the promise of freedom when she was ready to claim it. The difference was everything. She spent the morning walking the estate's extensive grounds, marveling at the manicured gardens and wooded paths that wound through the property. Security personnel appeared occasionally in her peripheral vision, discreet, professional, never intrusive. The October air carried the sharp sweetness of fallen leaves and the last blooms of autumn flowers Mrs. Chen tended with obvious care. Lena found herself in a greenhouse behind the main house, surrounded by plants that shouldn't survive Connecticut winters, but thrived under glass and careful attention. She ran her fingers over exotic orchids and herbs she couldn't name, losing herself in the simple pleasure of living things that asked nothing of her except appreciation. Beautiful, aren't they? She turned to find Mrs. Chen standing in the doorway, pruning shears in hand, and a gentle smile on her weathered face. "I've never seen anything like this," Lena admitted. "Do you maintain all of this yourself?" "With help from a part-time gardener, yes. Mr. Romano gave me free rein when he bought the property. Said he wanted something alive here, something that grew instead of just existing." Mrs. Chen moved between the plants with practiced ease, checking soil moisture and trimming dead leaves. "I think he understood even then that he needed beauty in his life, even if he rarely took time to appreciate it." "Does he come here often?" "More now than he used to." Mrs. Chen's knowing look suggested she understood exactly why that might be. "Having you here seems to agree with him. I haven't seen him this settled in years." The observation unsettled Lena more than it should have. She'd spent so long being invisible, being a problem to manage rather than a person to value, that the idea of her presence bringing Victor peace felt impossible to process. "I don't want to be a burden," she said quietly. "My dear girl." Mrs. Chen set down her shears and turned to face Lena fully. "You're not a burden. You're someone he's chosen to protect, and Victor doesn't make that choice lightly. In all my years working for him, I've seen him help exactly 7 people this way. Each one mattered to him personally. You matter to him." "Why? If you say you're just his secretary, I'll have to disagree strongly." Mrs. Chen's expression turned firm. "James told me how Victor reacted when he learned about your situation. The cold fury, the immediate action, the personal investment in your safety. That's not how he treats employees, Lena. That's how he treats people he cares about." The word care kept appearing in conversations about Victor, loaded with implications Lena wasn't ready to examine. She changed the subject, asking about the orchids, and Mrs. Chen graciously allowed the deflection. They spent the next hour discussing plants and gardening, ordinary conversation that felt like a gift after days of intensity and fear. Lena returned to the house just before noon to find Victor in the kitchen, his suit jacket discarded and his sleeves rolled up, making what appeared to be sandwiches with the focused concentration he brought to everything. "I thought you'd be buried in conference calls," she said, surprised to find him doing something so domestic. "I was. Then I got hungry and realized you probably were too." He didn't look up from slicing tomatoes with precise efficiency. "Mrs. Chen is in town running errands, and I figured we could both use lunch." The casual intimacy of the moment caught Lena off guard. Victor Romano, billionaire executive and rumored criminal mastermind, making sandwiches in his kitchen like this was normal, like they were normal. "I didn't know you cooked," she said, settling onto a bar stool to watch him work. "I don't, really, but I can manage the basics when necessary." He assembled sandwiches with the same precision he applied to business deals, each ingredient placed with deliberate care. "My mother insisted I learn before I left home, said no man should be helpless in his own kitchen." It was the first personal detail about his past Victor had ever shared. Lena found herself hungry for more, for glimpses behind the armor he wore so effortlessly. "Where did you grow up?" "Brooklyn, originally. Red Hook, before it gentrified." Victor slid a plate across the counter to her. "My father worked the docks. My mother cleaned houses for families in Manhattan. They wanted better for me, pushed me toward education even when we could barely afford it." "They must be proud of what you've built." Something shadowed Victor's expression. "They died before they could see it. Car accident when I was 23, just after I'd started my first company." He picked up his own sandwich but didn't eat it, his gaze distant. "Sometimes I wonder what they'd think of the man I became, whether the methods I use would disappoint them." The vulnerability in his admission made Lena's chest tighten. "I think they'd be proud. You help people, Victor. You use your power to protect the vulnerable. That matters." "I also destroy people who cross me. I make threats I fully intend to carry out. I exist in moral gray areas most people find uncomfortable." His dark eyes found hers, searching. "Does that frighten you?" Lena considered the question honestly. A week ago, the answer might have been yes, but she'd seen Victor's ruthlessness directed on her behalf, had watched him dismantle Marcus's life with cold efficiency, and all she'd felt was relief, gratitude, safety. "No," she said finally. "It doesn't frighten me. Maybe it should, but it doesn't." Victor studied her for a long moment, then nodded and finally took a bite of his sandwich. They ate in comfortable silence, and Lena marveled at how natural this felt. Sharing a meal, existing in each other's space without performance or fear. Her phone buzzed halfway through lunch. A text from an unknown number made her freeze, sandwich forgotten. "I know you think you're safe. You're not. This isn't over." Victor noticed her reaction immediately. "What is it?" Lena handed him the phone with shaking hands. She watched his expression go cold, watched fury tighten his jaw and darken his eyes to something dangerous. "He can't help himself," Victor said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded violence. "Even facing complete destruction, Marcus can't let go of the need to terrorize you." "How did he get this number? I changed everything." "He likely used one of those people finder services or bribed someone." Victor was already typing on his own phone, his movements sharp with controlled anger. "James, I'm forwarding you a text Lena just received from Marcus Holloway. I want the source traced immediately and added to the restraining order violation documentation." He set his phone down and reached for Lena's hands, which had started trembling. "This is actually good news." "How is this good news?" "Because he just violated a court order within 24 hours of it being issued. That's grounds for immediate arrest." Victor's smile held no warmth. "Marcus just handed us exactly what we need to put him away." Within 30 minutes, James had traced the text to a burner phone purchased at a bodega in Queens. Security footage from the store confirmed Marcus had made the purchase himself. Too stupid or too desperate to cover his tracks. Victor forwarded everything to his legal team and the police, building a case that would bury Marcus under the weight of his own actions. "He'll be arrested within hours," Victor explained as they sat in his study, watching digital evidence compile on his laptop. "The restraining order violation alone is serious, but combined with his existing criminal charges and the pending civil suit, he's looking at significant jail time." Lena should have felt triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. Will it ever really be over? Or will there always be another text, another threat, another reminder that he refuses to let me go? It ends when men like Marcus learn there are consequences they can't escape. Victor closed the laptop and turned to face her fully. "And I promise you, Lena, he's going to learn that lesson thoroughly." The afternoon passed in tense waiting, both of them trying to focus on work while monitoring updates from James and the legal team. Victor made calls and reviewed contracts while Lena attempted to read a book from his extensive library, but her mind refused to settle. She kept checking her phone, half expecting another threatening message despite blocking the number. Just after 4, James appeared in the study doorway. "Marcus Holloway was arrested 20 minutes ago. He's being held without bail due to the restraining order violation combined with his prior arrest record." Relief flooded through Lena so intensely, her vision blurred. "He's in jail? And he'll stay there pending trial." James's expression held grim satisfaction. Between the criminal charges and the civil suit, Mr. Romano's legal team expects him to accept a plea deal that includes a significant prison sentence and a permanent restraining order with enhanced penalties for any future violations. Victor nodded, dismissing James with a look. Once they were alone, he moved to where Lena sat curled in an oversized chair, crouching beside her so they were eye level. "It's over," he said quietly. "Marcus can't hurt you anymore." The words unlocked something in Lena's chest, some tight knot of fear she'd been carrying for so long it had become part of her. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and cathartic, releasing months of accumulated terror and helplessness. Victor pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried against his shoulder. He didn't offer empty reassurances or tell her to calm down. He simply held her, solid and steady, while she purged the poison Marcus had left in her system. When the tears finally subsided, Lena found herself still wrapped in Victor's embrace, his hand stroking her hair with surprising gentleness. She should pull away, reestablish professional boundaries, remember all the reasons this was complicated. But she couldn't bring herself to move. "Thank you," she whispered against his shirt. "For everything. For seeing me when no one else did. For caring enough to fight for me." "I'd do it again." Victor's voice rumbled through his chest. "I'd do anything to keep you safe, Lena. You have to know that by now." She lifted her head to look at him, finding his face closer than she'd expected. His dark eyes held an intensity that stole her breath, and Lena saw her own confused feelings reflected back at her. Gratitude mixing with something deeper. Protection bleeding into desire. Safety transforming into something far more dangerous. Victor, she started, not knowing how to finish. He seemed to understand anyway. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away the tear tracks on her cheeks. We don't have to define this right now. We don't have to make sense of what's happening between us. All that matters is that you're safe, and you're here, and for the first time since I've known you, you're not afraid. I am afraid, Lena admitted, just not of Marcus anymore. What are you afraid of? This, you, the way I feel when you look at me like that. The confession came easier than it should have. I spent 6 months in a relationship built on control and violence. I don't know how to trust what feels good anymore. What if I'm just trading one kind of dependence for another? Victor's expression softened with understanding. That's a fair concern, and it's one we should take seriously. He pulled back slightly, giving her space to breathe. I don't want to be another man who controls you, Lena. I want to be someone who gives you room to discover who you are when you're not surviving. How do we do that when you're the one protecting me, housing me, managing every aspect of my safety? By acknowledging the imbalance and actively working to correct it. Victor stood, moving to the window with his hands in his pockets. Starting tomorrow, we establish new boundaries. You have complete autonomy over your daily choices. Where you go on the property, what you eat, when you work, or rest. I'll stop making decisions for you without consultation. And when you're ready, we'll start transitioning you back to independence. And what if I'm not ready? What if I like feeling protected? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them seemed ready to address fully. Victor turned back to her, his expression unreadable. Then we'll figure it out together, he said simply. But Lena, I need you to understand something. Whatever this is between us, it only works if you choose it freely. Not because you're grateful, not because you feel obligated, but because you genuinely want it. How will I know the difference? Time. Distance from the trauma. Therapy, if you're open to it. Victor's voice gentled. Healing isn't linear, and trust takes time to rebuild. I'm patient. I can wait while you figure out what you want. The offer felt like a gift, like Victor was handing her the power to define their relationship on her own terms. Lena stood, crossing to where he waited by the window and took his hand in both of hers. I don't know what I want yet, she admitted, but I know I want to find out, and I want you here while I do. Something shifted in Victor's expression, warmth breaking through the controlled facade. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with old-world gallantry that made her heart stutter. Then I'm not going anywhere, he promised. They spent the evening in comfortable companionship, Victor working on his laptop while Lena explored his book collection and eventually settled on a thriller that held her attention. Mrs. Chen served dinner in the informal dining room, pot roast and vegetables that reminded Lena of Sunday dinners from before her mother got sick. As darkness fell over the estate, Lena felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace, but the possibility of it. Marcus was in jail. The threats had stopped. She was safe in a beautiful house with a man who'd proven he'd move mountains to protect her. Tomorrow she could start thinking about the future, about what independence might look like, about whether the feelings developing between her and Victor were real or just trauma bonding wearing a prettier mask. But tonight, she let herself simply exist without fear. She was heading upstairs to bed when Victor called her name from his study doorway. Sleep well, Lena. His voice carried warmth that wrapped around her like a blanket. Tomorrow's a new day, the first day of the rest of your life. The words felt prophetic, heavy with promise. Lena smiled and continued upstairs, feeling lighter than she had in months. She woke near midnight to her phone buzzing insistently. Still half asleep, she grabbed it from the nightstand, expecting another update from James. Instead, she found herself staring at a text from a number she didn't recognize, her blood turning to ice as she read the message. Your boyfriend can't protect you forever. I have friends on the outside. They know where you are. Sweet dreams, baby. Marcus. Even from jail, he'd found a way to reach her, to poison her newfound peace with fresh terror. Lena's hands shook as she forwarded the message to both Victor and James, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd been stupid to think it was over, Stupid to believe that bars and restraining orders would stop a man as obsessed as Marcus. Her bedroom door opened without warning, and Lena nearly screamed before recognizing Victor's silhouette in the doorway. He wore pajama pants and nothing else, his hair disheveled from sleep, his expression carved from stone. "I got your message," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Pack a bag. We're leaving." "What? Where?" "Somewhere Marcus and anyone working for him will never find you." Victor moved into the room, his presence overwhelming in the dim light. "I should have done this from the start. No half measures. No restraining orders. No trusting the system to keep you safe. Victor, you can't just watch me." He pulled out his phone, already making calls despite the late hour. "James, initiate Protocol 7. Full extraction. Destination to be determined en route. I want the plane ready in 30 minutes. Lena's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. "What's Protocol 7? Victor's eyes met hers, and she saw something in them that was part determination, part desperation. "It's what I do when someone I care about is in immediate danger. It's complete relocation, new identity if necessary, total isolation until the threat is neutralized." "You're talking about making me disappear. I'm talking about keeping you alive." Victor's voice sharpened. "Marcus just proved he has resources we didn't account for. He has people on the outside willing to act on his behalf. That changes everything, Lena. I won't risk your safety on the assumption that normal security measures will be enough." "So what, I just vanish? Leave my life behind completely?" "Your life is what I'm trying to save." Victor moved closer, his hands settling on her shoulders. "I know this is terrifying. I know it feels like I'm taking away your choices again. But Marcus just made a credible threat against you from inside a jail cell. That tells me he's more dangerous than I initially assessed, and I need to respond accordingly." Lena wanted to argue, to push back against the control he was exerting, but fear won out over pride. If Marcus had people who knew where she was, people willing to act on his behalf, then staying here made her a sitting target. "Where would we go?" "I have a property in the Cayman Islands, remote, heavily secured, staffed with people whose loyalty is absolute." Victor's thumbs traced circles on her shoulders, a soothing gesture that contrasted with the intensity in his voice. "We can stay there as long as necessary while I handle Marcus permanently." The word permanently carried weight Lena couldn't ignore. "What does that mean, exactly?" Victor's expression went cold, the warmth draining from his eyes until they resembled black ice. "It means I stop playing by rules Marcus refuses to respect. It means I use every resource at my disposal to ensure he never threatens you again. It means I become the monster he seems to think I am." "I don't want you to—" "This isn't about what you want anymore." Victor's voice hardened with finality. "This is about survival. Marcus crossed a line tonight. He involved outside parties, made credible threats while in police custody, demonstrated a level of obsession that won't stop until one of you is dead. I'm not letting it be you." The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent shivers down Lena's spine. She'd never had someone fight for her like this, never had someone willing to burn the world down to keep her safe. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll go." Victor's relief was palpable. He pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her with desperate strength. "I'm going to keep you safe," he murmured against her hair. "Whatever it takes, Lena. I promise you that." She let herself lean into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. Through the window, she could see security lights illuminating the grounds, guards moving with increased urgency as Victor's Protocol 7 kicked into motion. Her old life was dissolving behind her like smoke, but standing in Victor's arms with his heart beating steady beneath her ear, Lena found she didn't mourn its loss. That life had been built on fear and survival. Whatever came next, at least she wouldn't be facing it alone. James appeared in the doorway, fully dressed despite the late hour. "The plane is ready, sir. I've arranged for a security detail to meet us at the airport and another team at the Cayman property. Mrs. Chen is packing essentials for Miss Hart now." "Good." Victor released Lena with obvious reluctance. "We leave in 20 minutes. Full communications blackout once we're airborne. I don't want any possibility of our location being tracked." As James disappeared to coordinate the extraction, Lena looked up at Victor, seeing past his controlled exterior to the man beneath. Someone driven by fierce protectiveness. Someone who'd claimed responsibility for her safety and refused to fail. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for caring this much." Victor's hand came up to cup her face, his expression softening. "You're worth caring about, Lena. When are you going to believe that?" Before she could answer, he was gone, leaving her alone to process the whirlwind her life had become. She dressed quickly in clothes Mrs. Chen had left on the bed. Practical travel wear that suggested the older woman had anticipated exactly this scenario. By the time Lena made it downstairs, the house was alive with controlled chaos. Security personnel moved with military precision, loading bags into vehicles while James coordinated communications. Victor stood in the center of it all, directing operations with the same ruthless efficiency he brought to corporate acquisitions. When he saw Lena, something in his expression gentled. He crossed to her, taking her hand in his. "Ready?" he asked. Lena looked around at the beautiful house that had been her sanctuary for such a brief time, then back at Victor's dark eyes holding promises of protection and something deeper. "Ready," she confirmed. They climbed into the SUV, Victor keeping her hand clasped in his as they drove through the darkness toward the private airfield where his plane waited. Lena watched Connecticut disappear behind them, watched her fragile new beginning dissolve into another flight, another escape. But this time, she wasn't running alone. This time, she had Victor Romano at her side, a man whose power matched his promises, whose protection came with the implicit understanding that he'd sacrifice anything to keep her safe. As they boarded the sleek private jet and settled into leather seats that cost more than her annual salary, Lena finally let herself acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling for Victor Romano, falling for his fierce protectiveness, his unwavering dedication, the way he made her feel seen and valued for the first time in her life. It was dangerous and complicated and probably spectacularly stupid given the circumstances. But as the plane lifted off into the night sky, carrying them toward an island sanctuary where Marcus couldn't reach, Lena found she didn't care about the wisdom of her feelings. For the first time in months, she felt alive rather than just surviving. And if that meant risking her heart on a man who fought his battles in shadows, who protected her with methods that skirted legal lines, who looked at her like she was something precious worth defending, well, that was a risk she was finally willing to take. The Cayman Islands emerged from the pre-dawn darkness like a jewel, all turquoise water and white sand beaches that looked impossibly perfect in the growing light. Lena pressed her face to the plane window, watching paradise materialize below them, and tried to reconcile this tropical sanctuary with the violence that had driven them here. Victor sat beside her, his hand still clasping hers like he'd forgotten to let go during the 4-hour flight. He'd spent most of the journey on encrypted calls, his voice low and dangerous as he issued orders Lena was probably better off not understanding. She'd caught fragments, words like surveillance, associates, and permanent solution, that painted a picture of the machinery Victor was setting in motion to end Marcus's threat once and for all. The plane touched down at a private airstrip, and within minutes they were transferred to an SUV with windows tinted dark enough to hide them from the world. The drive took them along coastal roads where million-dollar homes perched on cliffs overlooking water so clear Lena could see fish swimming 20 feet below the surface. Victor's property sat at the end of a gated drive, hidden from the main road by dense tropical vegetation. The house itself was a modern masterpiece of glass and white stone, designed to blur the lines between interior and exterior. Infinity pools reflected the sky, and terraces wrapped around every level, offering views that belonged in magazines. "It's beautiful," Lena breathed as they pulled up to the entrance. "It's safe," Victor corrected, though his eyes held approval at her reaction. "That's all that matters right now." The security was less obvious here than in Greenwich, but no less comprehensive. Lena spotted cameras disguised as landscape lighting, pressure sensors hidden in decorative rocks, and guards positioned at strategic points around the property with the casual alertness of professionals who knew their business. A woman in her 30s met them at the door, her dark skin glowing in the morning sun, her smile genuine despite the early hour. "Mr. Romano, welcome back, and you must be Miss Hart. I'm Elena, the property manager. We've prepared the master suite for you both." "Both?" Lena glanced at Victor, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. The other bedrooms are being used by security personnel, he explained. I can have someone reassigned if you'd prefer separate rooms. The offer was genuine, Lena could tell, but something in Victor's expression suggested he didn't want to be separated from her. And honestly, after the terror of Marcus's midnight threat, Lena didn't want distance either. The master suite is fine, she said quietly. Relief flickered across Victor's face before his controlled mask returned. He thanked Elena and led Lena through the house, pointing out various rooms and features with the distracted air of someone whose mind was elsewhere. The master suite occupied the entire third floor, a sprawling space with windows on three sides that made Lena feel like she was floating above the ocean. There's a sitting room if you want privacy, Victor said, gesturing to an adjacent space separated by sliding doors. And the bathroom has double everything, so we won't be fighting for shower time. The domesticity of the comment caught them both off guard. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Victor cleared his throat. I need to make some calls. Will you be all right? Lena nodded, suddenly exhausted from the adrenaline crash. I think I'll try to sleep for a few hours. Victor moved toward her, then stopped himself, his hand dropping back to his side. The restraint in the gesture spoke volumes about the line he was trying not to cross, the boundaries he was determined to maintain even as circumstances pushed them closer together. Get some rest, he said softly. You're safe here, Lena. I promise. After he left, Lena explored the suite with wondering eyes. The bed was enormous, facing floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the endless blue of Caribbean water. The bathroom featured a shower large enough for 4 people and a tub that looked more like a small pool. Everything was pristine, expensive, designed for luxury. She showered quickly, washing away the residue of fear and travel, then crawled into bed wearing one of the silk robes she found in the closet. The sheets felt like water against her skin, impossibly soft and cool. Despite her exhaustion, sleep felt distant. Her mind kept circling back to Victor's words on the plane, to the promises he'd made, to the question of what came next. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to find afternoon sun slanting through the windows and Victor sitting in one of the chairs by the window, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. How long have you been there? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. About 20 minutes. You were restless. Bad dreams, I think. I wanted to make sure you were okay. He stood, moving to the small kitchenette area. Elena sent up lunch. Are you hungry? Lena realized she was starving. She joined Victor at the small table, where platters of fresh fruit, grilled fish, and vegetables had been arranged with artistic care. They ate in comfortable silence, and Lena marveled again at how natural this felt, sharing space with Victor, existing in his orbit without performance or fear. I spoke with my legal team, Victor said eventually, setting down his fork. Marcus made a critical mistake with that text last night. How so? He used a phone smuggled into the jail by an associate, a violation that's landed both him and the associate with additional charges. More importantly, the content of his threat gives us grounds to argue he's a danger to public safety, which means the judge will likely deny bail for any future proceedings. Victor's smile held no warmth. He's not getting out, Lena. Not for a very long time. Relief washed through her, but it came tangled with other emotions she couldn't name. What about his friends on the outside? The people he threatened to send after me? Being handled as we speak. Victor's voice took on that cold edge she'd come to recognize. I have people very good at finding other people. By tonight, anyone Marcus might have contacted about you will receive a visit explaining why that's a spectacularly bad idea. You're threatening them. I'm protecting you. There's a difference. Victor leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes holding hers. I won't apologize for using every resource at my disposal to ensure your safety. If that makes me a monster, I'll wear the label gladly. You're not a monster. The words came automatically, surprising them both. You're just someone who protects the people you care about. There's nothing monstrous about that. Even when my methods involve intimidation and threats? Even then, Lena reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Marcus used those same tools to destroy me. You're using them to save me. Intent matters, Victor. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the controlled facade that let her see the man beneath, someone desperate to be seen as more than just his ruthlessness, someone who needed to believe his violence served a higher purpose. I need to tell you something, he said quietly, and I need you to listen without interrupting, because if I stop, I might not find the courage to start again. Lena's heart kicked against her ribs, but she nodded. Victor took a breath, his thumb tracing patterns on the back of her hand. 18 months ago, I hired you because you were the most qualified candidate. You were brilliant, efficient, exactly what I needed. But somewhere in those 18 months, you became more than just my secretary. You became the person I looked forward to seeing every morning. The one whose opinion mattered when I made decisions. The one whose smile could improve my entire day. He paused, and Lena saw the vulnerability in his eyes, something she'd never expected from a man like Victor Romano. When I saw those bruises, he continued, his voice rough, something broke inside me. The thought of someone hurting you, of you living in fear, it made me want to burn the world down. And I realized then that I'd been lying to myself about what you meant to me. His eyes found hers, unflinching. I'm in love with you, Lena. I have been for months, maybe longer. And I know the timing is terrible. I know you need space to heal. I know this complicates everything, but I needed you to know the truth. The confession hung between them, heavy with implications. Lena's mind raced, trying to process what he'd just said, trying to separate gratitude from genuine feeling, protection from love. Say something, Victor said when the silence stretched too long. Even if it's that I'm an idiot who just made everything worse. You're not an idiot, Lena's voice came out whisper soft. You're terrifying and wonderful, and I don't know how to handle what I'm feeling right now. What are you feeling? Confused, grateful, scared that I'm confusing safety with love because you're the first person who made me feel protected in so long. She pulled her hand from his, needing space to think. How do I know this is real, Victor? How do I know I'm not just latching onto you because you saved me from Marcus? You don't. Victor's honesty was brutal but necessary. And neither do I, honestly. That's why I didn't want to say anything yet. Why I wanted to give you time and space to heal before putting this on you. But Marcus forced my hand last night, brought us here, and I realized I might not get another chance to tell you the truth. What if we're making a mistake? What if this is just trauma bonding dressed up as something more? Then we'll figure it out together. Victor stood, moving to the windows with his hands in his pockets. But Lena, I've felt things for you that have nothing to do with protecting you from Marcus. The way you laugh at terrible jokes when you think no one's listening. How you reorganize my desk every few weeks because you can't help improving systems. The way you defend people who can't defend themselves, even when it costs you. He turned back to face her. Those feelings existed long before I knew you needed saving. Lena stood, crossing to where he waited by the window. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, beautiful and vast and full of possibilities. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she admitted. Or maybe I already have. But I'm terrified of what that means, of whether I can trust my own feelings right now. Then don't trust them yet. Victor's hand came up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. Take all the time you need. I'll still be here when you're ready. What if I'm never ready? What if the damage Marcus did is too deep? Then I'll still be here, loving you anyway. That's what this is, Lena. Not a transaction, not protection with conditions. Just me, choosing you, regardless of what you can give me in return. The words broke something open in Lena's chest. She'd spent so long believing love came with strings attached, that care demanded payment in submission or silence. But Victor was offering something different, love without conditions, protection without possession, space to heal without abandonment. Kiss me, she whispered. Victor's eyes searched hers, checking for certainty, for genuine desire rather than gratitude or obligation. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away. Lena didn't pull away. She rose on her toes to meet him halfway, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders as his lips found hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent, like Victor was afraid she might shatter. But Lena pressed closer, needing more than careful handling, needing to feel alive and desired and whole. She opened her mouth against his, and Victor responded with a groan that vibrated through both of them. His arms came around her, pulling her tight against his body. and Lena felt 6 months of fear and tension dissolve in the heat building between them. This wasn't Marcus's demanding possession or violent control. This was Victor treating her like something precious, someone worth cherishing, and the difference made her want to weep. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me if this is too much. Tell me if you need me to stop." "I don't want you to stop." Lena's hand slid from his shoulders to his face, tracing the sharp lines of his jaw. "I want to feel something other than fear. I want to remember what desire feels like when it's not wrapped in violence." "We have time." Victor's voice was rough but controlled. "We don't have to rush this." "What if I want to rush it? What if I want to claim this moment, this feeling, before reality intrudes again?" Victor studied her for a long moment, then swept her into his arms with effortless strength, carrying her toward the enormous bed. He laid her down with careful reverence, then stretched out beside her, propped on one elbow so he could look at her properly. "Then we take what we want," he said, his hand tracing patterns on her hip through the silk robe. "But slowly, Lena. I want to savor every moment of this. I want to replace every bad memory with something beautiful." And he did. For the next hours, Victor proved that intimacy could be tender instead of violent, that desire could be generous instead of selfish, that pleasure could exist without fear. He touched her like she was art, kissed her like she was air, made love to her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the massive bed, the ceiling fan turning lazy circles overhead, the sound of waves drifting through open windows. Lena felt transformed, like she'd shed a skin she didn't know she was wearing. "Thank you," she whispered against Victor's chest. "For what?" "For seeing me, for fighting for me, for showing me what it feels like to be cherished instead of controlled." Victor's arms tightened around her. "You don't have to thank me for loving you the way you deserve." They dozed as afternoon faded to evening, wrapped in each other and the kind of peace that comes from finally claiming what you want. Lena woke to find Victor watching her again, his expression soft in the golden light. "I could get used to this," she said, stretching. "Good, because I'm planning to keep you." The possessiveness in his voice should have set off alarms, but Lena heard the question beneath it, the need for reassurance that she wanted this too. "I'm planning to let you," she confirmed. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the intimate bubble they'd created. Lena reached for it automatically, her stomach dropping when she saw James's name on the screen. "It's done," the message read. "Subject's associates have been neutralized. No further threats anticipated. Legal proceedings moving forward as planned." She showed Victor the message, watching his expression harden with satisfaction. "Marcus's last avenue of attack is closed," he said. "He's completely alone now, facing charges that will put him away for years. And even if he somehow gets out eventually, he'll know that coming near you means facing consequences he can't survive." "It's really over?" Lena could barely believe it. "It's really over." Victor pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You're free, Lena. Free to build whatever life you want, with whoever you want in it." The weight of those words settled over her like a blessing. Free. She'd forgotten what that felt like, what it meant to exist without fear dictating every choice. "What do you want?" Victor asked quietly. "If you could have anything, build any life, what would it look like?" Lena thought about that, testing different futures in her mind. "I want to keep working. I'm good at what I do, and I like feeling useful. But maybe not as your secretary anymore." "Oh?" Victor's eyebrows rose. "What did you have in mind?" "A real position, something where I'm valued for my skills rather than just my ability to manage your schedule. Maybe in operations or project management." She looked up at him. "I want to prove I can succeed on my own merit, not just because the boss is in love with me." Pride flashed across Victor's face. "I think that can be arranged. My operations director has been looking for a deputy. The position reports to her, not me, so there'd be no conflict of interest, and the salary is considerable. I'll need to find my own apartment too, somewhere in the city, close enough to work but separate from you." Victor stiffened slightly. "You want distance?" "I want independence," Lena corrected gently. "I need to know I can stand on my own, that I'm choosing to be with you because I want you, not because I need your protection. Can you understand that? The struggle played out across his features, the desire to keep her close, warring with respect for her autonomy. Finally, Victor nodded. I understand, and I'll help you find a place. But Lena? Yes? I'm going to spend a lot of time at your apartment. Fair warning. She laughed, the sound bright and free. I'm counting on it. They spent the next week in paradise, letting the Caribbean sun and gentle waves wash away the residue of trauma. Victor worked remotely, handling business calls from the terrace, while Lena read books she'd never had time for and learned to exist without constant vigilance. They made love with increasing confidence, learning each other's bodies and preferences, building intimacy on foundations of trust rather than desperation. James sent daily updates on Marcus's legal proceedings. The charges were stacking up: assault, restraining order violations, the smuggled phone incident, probation violations from previous arrests Lena hadn't known about. Victor's legal team was coordinating with prosecutors to ensure maximum sentencing, building a case that would keep Marcus in prison for at least 5 years, possibly longer. They're offering him a plea deal, Victor explained one evening as they watched the sunset from their terrace. 8 years with possibility of parole after 5, in exchange for pleading guilty to all charges and signing an enhanced restraining order that extends for life. If he refuses and goes to trial, he's looking at potentially 15 years without parole. He'll take the deal, Lena said with certainty. Marcus always takes the path of least resistance when he's cornered. She was right. 2 days later, James confirmed that Marcus had accepted the plea. He'd be transferred to a medium security facility in upstate New York within the month, and any contact with Lena, direct or through third parties, would result in additional felony charges. It's over, Lena said, testing the words. They felt surreal, impossible. He's really gone. He's really gone. Victor pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist. You won that battle, Lena. You survived, and you're stronger for it. We won that battle, she corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. You're stronger than you think, but I'm glad I got to fight beside you anyway. They returned to New York 3 days later, trading tropical paradise for the familiar chaos of the city. Victor had arranged for a corporate apartment in Chelsea for Lena to use while she searched for something permanent. A beautiful one-bedroom with exposed brick and huge windows, walking distance to Romano Tower, but far enough to feel independent. Her first day back at work felt surreal. Lena rode the elevator to the 68th floor in her new capacity as Deputy Director of Operations, reporting to Sarah Chen, James's daughter and the woman Victor had mentioned. Sarah was brilliant and no-nonsense, treating Lena with professional respect that had nothing to do with her relationship with Victor. I'm glad to have you on my team, Sarah said during their first meeting. Victor speaks highly of your organizational skills, but you'll need to prove yourself here just like anyone else. I don't give special treatment. I wouldn't want you to, Lena replied, meaning it. She threw herself into work with renewed energy, channeling months of suppressed potential into projects that actually challenged her. The operations department was a different world from executive support, fast-paced, strategic, full of problems that required creative solutions. Lena discovered she was good at it, maybe even brilliant at it. Victor maintained professional distance at the office, treating Lena with the same courteous respect he showed all employees, but in the evenings, he appeared at her apartment with takeout and wine, and the kind of focused attention that made her feel treasured. They were building something real, she realized, a relationship based on choice rather than circumstance, on mutual respect rather than power imbalance. 2 months after returning from the Caymans, Lena signed a lease on her own apartment in the West Village. It was small but perfect, with morning light that streamed through tall windows and a tiny balcony where she could grow herbs. Victor helped her move in, carrying boxes with the same intense focus he brought to everything. This is good, he said, looking around the space Lena had made her own. This is you finally claiming your life. Our life, Lena corrected, pulling him close. If you want to be part of it. Always. Victor's kiss was soft, promising. I'll always want to be part of it. Spring arrived in New York with cherry blossoms and longer days. Lena had been in her new position for 4 months and was already being considered for a promotion. She'd started therapy to process the trauma Marcus had inflicted, working with a counselor who specialized in domestic violence. The sessions were hard, but they were helping her understand the difference between protective love and possessive control. Victor remained patient through all of it, giving Lena space when she needed it, showing up when she asked, never demanding more than she could give. Their relationship deepened with time and trust, growing into something solid and real. One evening in late April, Victor showed up at Lena's apartment with an unusual expression, nervous, almost uncertain. He produced a small box from his pocket and Lena's heart kicked into overdrive. "Before you panic," he said quickly, "this isn't an engagement ring. I know we're not there yet, and I'm not going to rush you." He opened the box to reveal a delicate bracelet, silver links connected by a small charm in the shape of a key. "The key represents freedom," Victor explained, his voice soft. "Freedom from fear, freedom to choose, freedom to be exactly who you are without shrinking yourself for anyone. I want you to have it as a reminder that you're never trapped again. Not by Marcus, not by circumstances, not even by me. You're free, Lena. And I love you enough to honor that freedom above everything else." Tears burned behind Lena's eyes as she held out a wrist, letting Victor fasten the bracelet with gentle hands. "I love you," she whispered. "Not because you saved me, not because I'm grateful, but because you're you. Because you see me and value me and give me room to become whoever I'm meant to be. That's all I've ever wanted." Plus, Victor pulled her close, and Lena felt the rightness of it settle in her bones. This man, this love, this life they were building together. They made love that night with the windows open, city sounds drifting up from the street below, the bracelet glinting on Lena's wrist like a promise. Afterward, wrapped in Victor's arms in her own bed in her own apartment, Lena realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for without knowing it. Not rescue, not protection, but partnership. Someone who fought beside her rather than for her. Someone who loved her strength as much as her vulnerability. Someone who honored her freedom even when it meant risking his own heart. 6 months later, Lena stood before a conference room full of executives, presenting a reorganization plan she'd developed for Romano Industries' international operations. Victor sat in the back row, his expression neutral, giving no indication that the brilliant woman commanding the room's attention shared his bed most nights. When the presentation ended to enthusiastic approval, Lena caught his eye for just a moment. Victor's smile was subtle, proud, full of love that didn't need public declaration. That evening, they celebrated her promotion to Director of Operations at their favorite restaurant in Tribeca. Over wine and pasta, Victor reached across the table to trace the key charm on Lena's bracelet. "Are you happy?" he asked simply. Lena thought about that question. Thought about how far she'd come from the terrified woman hiding bruises in a queen's apartment. Thought about the strength she'd discovered, the love she'd claimed, the life she'd built on her own terms. "I'm happy," she confirmed. "Not because everything is perfect, but because I'm finally living instead of just surviving. Because I have work I'm proud of, independence I fought for, and someone who loves me without trying to own me." "Good." Victor's hand found hers across the table. "Because watching you thrive has been the greatest privilege of my life." They walked home through the city that had witnessed both Lena's darkest moments and her reclamation of power. The night was warm, the streets alive with people and possibility. Victor's arm was solid around her shoulders, but Lena knew she could step away any time and he'd let her go. That was the difference. That was everything. 2 years after the day Victor had first seen her bruises, Lena Hart stood in the bathroom of the apartment she shared with Victor. They'd moved in together 6 months prior, a decision made freely and celebrated joyfully. She looked at her reflection and saw someone strong, someone valued, someone who'd survived hell and emerged transformed. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the one who'd hidden behind concealer and fear. This woman stood tall, met the world's gaze directly, knew her own worth and demanded it be recognized. She heard Victor moving in the kitchen, making coffee the way he did every morning, a domestic ritual that still made her smile. In a moment, she'd join him, kiss him good morning, discuss their days over breakfast like the partners they'd become. But first, Lena took a moment to acknowledge the journey that had brought her here. The fear and pain, yes, but also the courage and growth. The man who'd hurt her was serving his sentence, becoming smaller in her memory with each passing day. The man who'd saved her had become so much more: lover, partner, the person who'd shown her that protection and freedom weren't opposites but could exist in beautiful balance. Lena touched the key charm on her wrist, a talisman she never removed. She was free now, free to love and be loved, free to succeed on her own merit, free to build a life that reflected her strength rather than her fear. She'd won, not just survival, but the war for her own soul. And that victory was sweeter than any revenge could have been. "Coffee's ready," Victor called from the kitchen. Lena smiled at her reflection one last time, then went to meet the man she'd chosen, and who'd chosen her back every single day. The future stretched before her, full of possibilities she'd earned the right to claim. And for the first time in years, Lena Hart walked toward it without fear, knowing exactly who she was and what she deserved: everything.